Hey, welcome to Hanging Out at Mom and Pop's. I am Joel. Oh, wait, this way. I got to go this way. And you are? Who are you? This guy, this box.
I'm Tyson.
Yeah, there he is. I feel like I'm poking your box. This is fun. We're off to a great start. All right.
Exactly.
So
basically, ain't technology grand?
It is phenomenal. So obviously, what this is an experiment. Even though it says I gotta learn to point in opposite directions here. It says live in the upper corner, so I'm gonna assume this isn't actually streaming live because I set it up as a recording, not a live. But we're gonna pretend like it's live because hopefully one day we'll have enough subscribers to justify such a thing. Then people will leave.
Yeah, and you know what? Interact. If we happen to if we've screwed this up and we happen to have folks come in here because we are streaming live, I'll field any comments or chats or anything that comes in.
There you go. There you go. That'd be great. So, yeah. So in case you have no idea who we are, which I'm going to bank on that, we are the video clerks at Mom and Pop's Video Shop. I don't know that we should say fictitious, but let's just say a video store that's part of your imagination. your nostalgic driven imagination. And we're basically 40-something-year-old guys who love to talk movies, horror movies specifically, but we talk about all kinds of genres on the show. We have we're up to a weekly show, and comes out right now as we record this every Monday around. It depends. It varies, but usually around like 11 a.m. on Mondays Eastern time. We have like a pre-recorded, edited type show that comes out. That's sort of our like foundational thing, but we decided we'd like to do this too. This is more of like just a podcast. It's more chill, hence why it's called Hanging Out at Mom and Pop's. This is just an opportunity for us to hopefully over time build up a community with you awesome listeners. And as we record this, the 77 or so subscribers that we do have, thank you so much. Obviously, I'm sure several of you are people who know, like, and at least on some level kind of respect at least Tyson. And so
I was going to say, and they still want to hang out with us anyway. So that's what's even more amazing.
That is kind of amazing.
These are people that already know us and they still follow us.
Yeah, and we're just getting started. Yeah, this is we're very early days on the channel. We do hope to grow it. One of the big things that I think Tyson and I both could agree on 100% is that obviously we're going to talk about movies and nostalgia and pop culture and all that kind of stuff. But we want it to be fun. Like, this is meant to be a fun show for everybody. And B, it's also an opportunity to where it's something that I've tried to do with some of the other shows I've been involved with, like Retro Movie Geek and Jay the Dead's New Horror Movies, where I love to champion independent filmmakers and artists and have them come on, whether they are a filmmaker or an author or like my buddy Lou, who does the cool cardboard art, whatever it is. Anything in the realm of movies or retro or VHS or any of that, it's a very wide tent, a very big tent. And I would love to have folks like that on with us. One other thing I want to say, these streams, as far as I'm concerned, will not be edited, meaning we're going to have the full stream. It'll go out on the channel as is. And then, I mean, I might cut out segments of it, but like, for instance, right off the bat, I love the fact that I forgot to do this, Tyson. I wanted to have our first banner come up. Hey, there it is. Okay. So this is also an excuse for us to test out StreamYard.
Or as Joel and I like to call it, Scream Yard.
Yeah, actually, yes. I told Tyson he did it as a typo. And he said StreamYard. And I was like, from here on out, dude, I only want to refer to this. I actually I make the mistake of saying StreamYard and then correct myself with other people. I'm like, sorry, I meant ScreamYard. So yes, it's actually so far I love it. It's great software. I'm not trying to already be a shill for them to get them to be a sponsor, but I am saying as software goes, it has been decidedly easy to use, all things considered.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah. All right, so let's just jump right into it. So we have three.
Yeah, what are we doing today?
Okay, so three big things we're going to cover. So that's the other one thing is we want to give this some structure. So right off the bat, we're going to have a indie spotlight. Now, for the purposes of this, it's going to be talking about a independent found footage film that was made by a film school called Futures Explored, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we get to that segment. But we also will follow that up with VHS talk, which can be anything to do with VHS. So tapes, tech. So if one of us gets a VCR and we want to talk it up, or we got a new camera, and by new we mean a 40-year-old, Panasonic or Quasar, kind of camera, and media. So anything. What's that?
I said a Polaroid.
Oh, a Polaroid, yeah. Sure, shake it like a Polaroid. You could do that. And then media would be anything, or is that what you were saying was the media? It could be magazines, books, anything regarding that, as long as it has something to do with VHS. We'll talk about all this thing. We'll talk about books about other topics, but they won't be in VHS talk, obviously. And then the final, the main event of this episode is going to be ranking horror icons of the 1980s, but there's a catch. Right, Tyson? What's the catch?
The catch is that these icons are not Jason, Freddy, Michael Myers, and maybe other handful that you would expect to find on a 80s horror icon list. But we figured that a lot of those were pretty obvious. And if you were to Google it, you would find 100 other lists that include those particular characters. Yes. So we're trying to think a bit outside of the proverbial icon horror box, if you will.
Now, I would say you would agree with me. There are a few on the list that are, let me put it this way, with horror fans are a given. I feel like a lot of horror fans will be, oh, well, yeah, of course you do that. But we do try to pick at least several. I'd actually think the majority of the list is things that you and I are just massive fans of. And we feel like at this point, because of how people talk about them, the impact they've had, either literal or figurative, the impact that they've had on horror and on movies, that they definitely deserve to be icons. So this is our ranking. It's in no particular order. It's not like a top 10 list or anything like that. It's just ranking. These are ones we believe to be horror icons that don't get talked about maybe as much. There are a few that do, and you'll recognize them when we get to them. But there are several on here that aren't as thought of as icons. So
yeah, the way I looked at this, Joel, was like back in the day when you would get together on a weekend with your friends and you would either go to the store or maybe they rented something and said, hey, have you seen the new Friday the 13th? Yeah. Have you seen the new Nightmare on Elm Street? Yeah. Okay, but have you ever seen this? And you're like, no, I have no idea what this is. And it's something that, a lot of my picks were things that stick out in my memory as not being those typical franchise installments, but something that I very much remember from my childhood, which just so happens to be in the 80s.
Yeah. So that is our main event. And I guess then, do you want to, we should probably just kick it off. And eventually I hope to have like some cool little intros for different segments that we do, but we don't have that yet. So we're going to start things right off. I say we go into the indie spotlight. And do you want to set this up, Tyson, or would you like me to?
Well, I can tell you the title.
I'm putting you on the spot.
And that's okay. That's part of this format. So what I can tell you is that the indie film that Joel and I will be covering this afternoon, I had to look at my watch. The title of the indie film is The Grove. So Joel, would you like to explain to the fine folks what The Grove is and how it came to be?
I will. I think even better than that, Tyson. What I am going to do is, why don't we watch the trailer together, you, me, and our wonderful audience that is hopefully viewing this. I will hit play and we will watch the short. It's a fairly short trailer for The Grove.
A few weeks, actually a few days before she, I remember she went into her house and I heard a song.
I got a text from her on the day before she died.
I need to get rid of this box!
It said, make the music stop, whatever the hell that means.
with this supernatural shit. F this, I'm out.
I need to get rid of this box. I need to get rid of this box.
I just want answers. That's all I'm looking for.
All right. Hopefully I unmuted us correctly. So that is the trailer for The Grove. Obviously, it is a found footage film. As we record this is actually on June 9th, 2023. This is its premiere date on POV Horror. You saw the little icon at the beginning there. POV Horror is a streaming service owned, operated, and is the brainchild of a guy who is fantastic. I've had him on Retro Movie Geek, Michael Steinberg. He also is also known as the found footage critic. He was on HMP back in 2018. Great guy, and he's doing really cool things with some streaming, and especially as it relates to horror. So definitely recommend all that. And obviously, Tyson, it goes without saying, I'm sure we'll have links to all that in the description of this video.
Absolutely.
And he thought I'd be interested in The Grove because of a couple things. One, he knows that I'm a big fan of like regional kind of DIY horror. And he basically said what is kind of interesting about it as well is the fact that it was done by a school called Futures Explored. And I don't want to mess up what their thing says, but they have a film and media program. And it's a vocational program designed to provide working knowledge of film production and then build upon those skills with a continuing studio participation. They go into like what the curriculum is. And specifically, it is a group that is meant for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So everybody involved in this movie was a student at this school. I believe that the teacher, I guess I'm calling him the main teacher. I don't know if that's his actual title, and I apologize. I don't have his name in front of me. But he, oversees the program. But everybody else, if I'm understanding it right, all the actors, the production crew, everybody else are students at this school, which is really cool to me. And I will say the thing about it is, and I've seen my fair share of like really low budget indie stuff, student made stuff. And I am always very, 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 very loath to be critical in that like I don't compare what somebody's doing at like, at one level to like, oh, well, it's not like the latest blah, 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 big studio corporate movie. However, that being said, these days I actually find myself preferring the really like no budget, low budget stuff to some of the heartless, soulless corporate crap we get. But that aside, put that aside for a second. As it just I'm very loath because and you and I have talked about this off this show and just as in our friendship, as a indie filmmaker myself from back in the day, I know how hard it is. It's hard to make anything, whether it's perceived as others as good or bad. You as the storyteller, it's very difficult to detach yourself and see it in anything other than like through a very critical lens. All that being said, I sincerely feel like having we watched this movie. I got a screener. I know you got a screener, and you watched it as well. And we'll get your thoughts here in a second. It's about 46 minutes long. I watched it with my kids. I remember when I saw the trailer first, I thought, wow, actually this is, and mainly because I thought it was it's going to be like a student film. And also I didn't necessarily know the age of the students involved. And I taught video productions to middle school kids and they were fantastic, but they're kids and they're learning. And so you're going to do all kinds of stuff. But I just thought the level of professionalism on display on the production side of things was impressive. I immediately noticed from the trailer that the performances had something that one of my beefs with a lot of found footage films I've seen, and I've seen nowhere near as many as Michael has seen. Like he has seen way more, and there's other people that are much bigger fans of the subgenre. I like the subgenre, but I'm much more selective. Like I don't just anything comes out found footage, I watch it. I'm selective, but I love Paranormal Activity and Blair Witch and all the usual ones. But what I really dug about this movie is the fact that there is a truth and an authenticity, not to get all like hoity-toity pretentious, to the performances, especially Larry, the main guy.
Yes.
I was like, whoa, dude, like it was really good. I mean, I'm sincerely pleasantly surprised at how engaging this movie was.
I feel 100% exactly like you do. And the first reaction that I had after watching this was I have seen far worse found footage films from far more prestigious filmmakers.
Sure.
And 100% agree with you. And that I think that's the thing that came out was the heart and the passion that everybody involved with this had. And, you talk about the reason you love this particular subgenre, one of the many reasons, is that independent spirit and that local. I feel like one of the things that really came through is these guys used what they had. I don't know the full backstory of this. I mean, it was filmed in a hotel. That's not exactly a spoiler, but I just got this sense of how much fun that was, where these guys probably had access to this very cool old hotel and then wrote a compelling story around that. And how many times have we said, if you have those two things, if you have access to the locations and you have a good story, I mean, you're ahead of the curve, right there.
Oh yeah.
And yes,
sure.
to your point, I feel like that the actors and the folks that were involved, I just got the impression everybody gave 110%. I don't feel like anybody phoned this in, and I have a lot of respect for that. So I enjoyed this as well. And I feel like, especially when it comes to found footage films, like, man, 46 minutes, talk about a sweet spot. Like, I feel like the link was perfect.
It was perfect. Yeah. Because I think if they had tried to pad it so that they could get it to 70 or 80 minutes, it would have probably had some real drag spots, because it's very much like a talking head oriented, especially the first part, because they're setting up the mystery and these characters' relationships and all that kind of stuff. So it definitely had a lot of that, but for 46 minutes, it worked. Like it did. I didn't feel bored. I actually watched this with all three of my kids. And they range in age, just to give a demographic idea, 13 to 16. So, and they've seen some horror, but it's funny. And I've mentioned this on other shows, they get more freaked out by subtlety and like supernatural, like, hints of things than they do about like straight up gore and like, like that kind of thing. Like they've seen some pretty gory horror flicks from the 80s and they love it. They love the effects, but they get how it's all done. So they just enjoy it from that perspective. But this and movies like this, I think, can freak them out. They actually jump twice. There's a few different jump scares in this, and there's two of them
too.
One of them specifically got everybody. It was actually really good, and it has kind of a humorous payoff. And that's the other thing, is there's actually humor in this that I thought worked well. You saw part of it in the trailer, which is totally the reaction I think most people would have in a similar situation, which is cool.
Yeah, it's finally. It's finally where you applaud somebody for reacting the way 99% of the rest.
Why would you stay here? Exactly. So yeah, I mean, honestly, man, I mean, I don't really have any like negative things to say. I mean, yeah, it's very low budget. It's, a student film, but it feels well produced, and the pacing was really good.
The caveat is, and this should apply to any film that we cover on this channel, is that it's not going to be for everybody.
Of course,
what I mean?
Of course,
I mean, there's going to be people that are looking to say, "Oh my God, this is so low budget. I can't." They want a $50 million.
Well, and I would argue, I'm not saying I don't want you here, because I enjoy a good big blockbuster movie when they're well made. But see, I hold them to a different standard. Because my thought process is, you got that much money that you're blowing on this thing that you probably don't need to. And in my opinion, the more money you have, the more that actually stifles the creativity. But if you're that kind of person, then I would argue maybe like the movies we're going to cover by and large in an indie spotlight section probably wouldn't be for you. I could see the bigger gripe with people who love indie and all that kind of stuff might be of like a slow factor. But again, restating, it's only 46 minutes long. So it feels like it doesn't overstay its welcome. And I will say this, to me, the ending and the payoff, and I don't want to give anything away, I loved where it went. I love that they didn't over-explain stuff at all. Like, they really didn't. But you're not confused. You're not like, well, wait a minute, why is this? It keeps you engaged with the characters. And a lot of that is attributable to Larry, which I believe, I could be wrong, but I think in real life his real name is Larry, the main actor.
Yes. At the end of the screen earning way, I know they gave you almost like a little behind the scenes.
Yes, and that is worth watching. 100%. Yeah, that is.
The other thing too is plot wise, it's felt fairly current, because the vibe I got right off the bat was, it was the true story out in California. What was her name of the Asian woman? Was it Eliza Lamb? or something in the Cecil Hotel.
Oh,
where
okay.
she had gone.
Oh, yeah, yes. It's like on the hotel.
Remember, she had gone missing, and they found her
Yes.
like in the
yeah,
water.
yeah. Spoiler
you know
alert.
what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was a true story, but and that's the other thought I had is like any really good, I mean, even some of the most classic horror films, in the genre, they're based in some true story,
Sure.
be it Psycho or Texas Chainsaw, and it's like, truth is way more horrifying than fiction, and you almost get this vibe that this could have been, the plot of the Grove. This is something that really could have happened, and
like
I think
inspired by an actual true story.
And it was well suited to the found footage sort of medium, because I could see friends and boyfriends and concerned people, almost doing like a documentary style, saying, hey, we're trying to figure out what happened to her, so we're going to the location, and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, there's a sequence.
I found it very inspiring.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
I was going to say, we've talked about maybe getting involved in some short films of our own, and like right off the bat, I immediately got to thinking of our area and old hotels and old places that I want to eventually chat with and say, hey, if you've got a slow weekend or something, could we come in and play around? Because I just get the feeling that's what these folks did to get this done. And the payoff,
it was really cool. It was a cool location for sure. And there's a sequence involving security cameras and like black and white, no sound, and they're trying to figure out what happened to Sarah. And I loved the way that played out. And there was like, it's one of those things where there's some very subtle things that happen, and it's creepy. Like that's the thing I would say for me, very few movies at this point, because I've seen so many of these, I find scary. You know what I mean? Like I don't really, but there are movies that creep me out and moments that creep me out. This movie had at least 2 to 3 moments that legit I found creepy. The security camera, there's something that happens. At the very, well, I'm not gonna say what, the very, very end, literally the final shot. You know what I'm talking about? There's a final shot when we get the credits and all that is subtle but creepy. Like there's something about it creepy. So I really, dude, I would recommend The Grove. Go to POV Horror, help support indie horror, help support indie filmmakers. These people are doing good stuff. I want to show their website real quick.
And I was going to say we'll definitely link Futures Explored in the description below as well, so that folks can follow them and support what they're doing, because it's a very, very cool project. Yeah,
and if you go into, they talk about their mission, and they have a bunch of information. They have like the different programs that they offer up. They have like, if you go to Film and Media, it shows you, they actually have, if you're in that area, I think it's in California. I don't remember exactly what. Oh, here we go.
Livermore. I think Sacramento. Okay. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I saw Sacramento. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't remember. I remember seeing Sacramento in the movie, but here on
I'm reading it. I'm reading it now. They're in the center, Joe, located in Livermore, Sacramento, and Stockton.
There you go. Like we are not Californians. So I know Sacramento, but not familiar with Livermore, but now I know. And so, they have a film camp. So that's pretty cool. But what also is cool, they have a donation. So they are a nonprofit,
right,
from my understanding. And, obviously you can help them out. And if you're so inclined to donate to them, but I think probably one of the best ways you could would be to check out this movie, go to POV Horror and check out what they are offering there as well. Because honestly, Michael is setting up some really cool stuff he's got a bunch of different streaming channels, some that are not horror related at all, but he does a lot of and some of it's very niched down, however you want to say it. And definitely worth checking all of that stuff out 100%. Recommend the Grove. And it sounds like you would as well.
Yes, most definitely. And just to recap, Joel, so as of today, where specifically can folks find this again?
They could go to POV Horror. It's either .com or .net. It'll be look in the description if you're watching, because it's not a live stream, so not an official one. I'm almost positive. I feel like it's .net, but maybe I'm wrong. It may be pov.horror.com, and I don't want to misstate it. So yeah, it'll be one of those in the link below. Definitely go check it out. And if you go there, and I would assume if you go there, there is, I know it is a subscription service. It's a reasonable price. I think he may offer like a trial as well. So, you know, you can check it out that way. I do not know if it's going to be available through like other sources like Amazon, blah, blah, blah. But I do know POV Horror would be the way to go. That would be how I'd recommend you to go anyway, just to support Michael and the work he's trying to do. Because it's really cool. If you're an indie filmmaker and you happen to be watching this, I know he's always looking for great content for his various channels and whatnot. So he'd definitely be somebody you want to reach out to as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So on that note, I think it's about time. And this is where a really cool like opening video would be nice. But we'll just jump right into our
we'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah, eventually. Yeah. I am also going to get a more comfortable chair, he said, after sitting here for not even 30 minutes. I'm sitting in a folding, like it's got a little cushion on it, but it's like one of those like folding chairs, you know, you'd get it like a convention hall or something. It's not great for long sitting. All right. So for VHS talk, the main thing, do you have anything specifically on the VHS talk front?
I don't think, I'm trying to think if I've picked up anything over the last week or so.
Okay.
Not really. I think the latest thing we did, it probably, I mean, for all I know, it's going to air after this, but it was our last unboxing that we did. I won't give anything away, but that was I think that was the last VHS acquisition that I was involved with. So
yeah,
I got nothing for today. What do you have?
Well, I was gonna say, since I'm intending this to go out like very shortly after we record it, that unboxing probably isn't going to show up till like sometime in like late July. So I think, or maybe later. I have to figure out how the timeline works. But yes, but yeah. So the main thing I got, and I'm sure there are people watching this channel that are very familiar with this company. But I knew of them because of all the various like VHS documentaries that you and I have watched. Mm-hmm. But I never really, up until recently, checked out their site and gotten into like some of the things they were offering. And that is, hopefully it's showing up, and I'm going to go to their website here in a second on the screen share, but Lunchmeat VHS is the name of the company. And I'm going to real quick share them. So this is their site. Let me close out this, and I'm going to go to their homepage for right now. So they have a ton of really cool stuff that you could check out. They're actually up to issue number 12, which I'll get to in a second. But so they have a magazine that goes out. I'm assuming it's maybe once a quarter. It may be more often. Maybe it's a once a month, but I don't think it is. I think I ended up actually buying 11, and then like right after that, I think 12 came out, or they were very short distance between the two. But anyway, I expected to get like a cool, handful of pages magazine that would be fun and be kind of like a cool little nostalgia trip. What I got, and let me go back to the wider view here. What I got is this really well-made, well-produced. I don't know if you could tell from there, but like from the glossiness, I mean, it's very like thick stock paper, right? What I love is the inside is, even though the paper's thick, like actually I was kind of in a weird way hoping, there's a magazine called Scary Monsters that I'm a big fan of that uses like the old newspaper
pulpy
paper. Yeah, like that print, what I'm talking about?
Sure.
And while this paper is actually much better quality, for sure, it's got like this zine vibe. Like if you look at it, it looks like it was Xeroxed, I mean, it's better quality. I mean, obviously the print is good and everything, but it just has that aesthetic, which I absolutely love. It's got that DIY quality to it, but it's so cool, man. It's like they go into, like if I just real quick, I don't want to give too much away from the issue because you should definitely pick this up. But it's produced, the editor-in-chief is Josh Schaefer. He's a guy I know has been on several of those documentaries that we've watched. A dude that I would love to one day get on the show just to talk about this magazine and his love of VHS and all that kind of thing, because the guy knows his stuff. But yeah, there's tons of reviews for classics like Bachelor Party Massacre, My Precious Revenge, Eat the Peach, Last Way Out, Shattered, If Your Kid's on Drugs, a anti-drug movie starring Burt Reynolds and Judd Nelson. So you can't go wrong there. Tons of great reviews of these movies, and it's great because they always have like the VHS box cover art in there. They have various other things. There's as you go through and I can't even say this right. Analogizing instead of advertising, audio, video plus. So delving like deeper into the AVP pulse. Yeah. So they get into like all the kind of stuff that you might get, you know, when these movies came out, presumably on VHS at the video store. So like all the various promotional items, that kind of stuff. Dude, it's awesome. It's a fantastic magazine. So, go ahead.
Joel, it's safe to say that this is for the serious physical media hound. Like,
yes.
If
you aren't into VHS, I don't know why you would begin this other than maybe you don't collect it anymore and you just like to, you know, take a trip down memory lane, and it's 100% wonderful for that. But this is great because
that's what I was going to ask you. This is more than just somebody that misses the good old days. This is for your avid collectors of VHS and VCR, because I think you said there's some practical articles in there as well that would, I guess, help the collector or the DIY repairer.
Yeah, and here's so I think I showed you issue. Which one did I show you? I showed you this one, or I showed you this one? I think I showed you this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember which one I showed you first? Was that with the one? Okay, that's issue 12.
I think it was number 11.
Okay, so this is 11. And in it, they cover, so we've got Gary Cohen rewinds video violence. Video violence is a shot on video classic that I don't know if you've ever seen it. Tyson is an absolute...
Is that the one that does it shot on VHS? Does it open in like the sporting goods store with the two weirdo pervs watching like the fitting room?
Yes,
right.
It does. Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Well, then I can officially say me, you, and probably 4 other people on the planet, I think, have probably seen video violence.
You know what? I have a feeling the folks that stop by Bob and Pops, they may know video violence. I just have this feeling. But that being said, it's a movie we should absolutely cover at some point, because it is that'd be the kind of movie that would be great to do like commentary over, like where we just got like a watch together, like while you know, we watch it, you guys out there watch it, and we all just kind of comment together. That'd be so much fun. But anyway,
and I'll lay a $5 blind bet that it's probably on Tubi.
Oh, I'm fairly positive it is. I think that's where I saw it. It may be. I can't remember, because I'd heard of it, but I hadn't seen it up until relatively recently. And so, but that's what I'm saying. It's the kind of magazine that covers video violence and does it seriously. You know what I mean? They're not being ironic. They're not being meta. They're not deconstructing. Screw that. They love this stuff and they're covering it, and God bless them for it.
Yeah.
They do this is the kind of profile work I want to see. I don't want to see profiles on like elitist Hollywood snobs. I want profiles on asbestos felt of the movie Killing Spree made by Tim Ritter. That's what I want, folks. That's what I want. So they've got that. And then they've also, I believe this is is it this issue or this issue? Hold on. One of them, because to your point, you made the comment about like, there's actually like things that can help you with your VCR. Okay, like it's VH science, right? So it deals with mold and dealing with mold on tapes, and it gets into like how to deal with it and blah, blah, blah. But here's the thing. So I got the 2 issues, and I realized for just a few bucks, you know what they had? Dude, they've got an actual pamphlet. I don't know if you can make it out. It's literally a how-to step-by-step guide. You see it?
Yep, and that's what I was trying to get at. Is this is more than just a hey, stop by if you love nostalgia type thing. This is for folks that are serious about this and are growing collections and restoring and maintaining. You know what I mean?
Because this is a legit mold removal from video cassettes. This is a legit problem. I just realized if we ever just put out the audio version of these, I probably need to also state the things that we're talking about specifically, just in case somebody's just listening, which is fine. But mold removal for video cassettes is it's a not a very big booklet. You can obviously see compared to, because I actually thought it was gonna be like a full magazine. I'm like, how would you do that as a magazine? But it's actually just like a little handy booklet, right?
Right.
So, but what's cool is it goes through literally step by step. And I feel like mold on VHS tape is probably one of the bigger issues that a lot of collectors run into. I know a buddy of ours that we're getting to know, Dewey Sean, huge VHS collector, great guy, sells them. I know he's talked about getting like he goes to like a storage thing or an estates or whatever. He gets a bunch of tapes, and then I've heard him talk about the mold issue, and I've heard other people obviously talking about it. I think fortunately up to this point, I think maybe I've gotten a couple that had something on them, but they wasn't horrible. But what's great is this can save them. So I think it's worth a few bucks, in my opinion. They're not a sponsor. We're not at a level where we've got sponsorships, and we would always tell you. And that's the other thing, just so we're clear on this. Tyson, I've discussed. So on other podcasts and things I do, specifically the one my wife and I do for our business, we don't do third-party like ads. I mean, we've got a it's called Half Size Me. We've got a YouTube channel, and that channel, because it's on YouTube, gets ads, right? That happens. But we've never had like, we're pitching someone else's thing on purpose, certainly not on the main show. And we don't do that. So, but that's that show. This show, I'm willing to do sponsorships, but it would only be for things that you or I actually use and can swear by. I wouldn't want to just pitch, I'm not to knock any of you out there that do this, but like, some supplement or some rando thing that I would never use. But this kind of thing I use or will use. And I could see any collector using this for sure.
Well, and specifically, because I think that for folks that maybe aren't lucky enough to have something like a Viper Video in Tampa that we have, an actual brick and mortar store that still sells physical media in bulk. If you're picking up VHS, a lot of it's probably going to be at yard sales and flea markets and the occasional eBay purchase. And sadly, a lot of those VH tapes have probably been sitting in garages and attics and basements for the last 20 plus years,
especially if it's Florida where humidity is what it's all about. I've got a dehumidifier where near mom and pops here because man, you don't mess with that stuff.
And I think that and I mean we even have dear friends I think that would laugh at us and say, yeah, that's why I only deal with streaming. But I think that's part of the challenge and part of the adventure with collecting physical media and doing what we do is there's a little bit of that, almost like Indiana Jones archaeologist, analog
artifacts,
restoration,
analog artifacts,
absolutely,
man. That's what 100%.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure as this goes, and I'm making a commitment more to Tyson than any of you out there that I will be trying to keep my rants to a relative minimum, but occasionally that's honestly Tyson gets paid the big bucks because he's here to be like, all right, come on back, buddy. Come on back.
Exactly.
But I feel to back up what
I need like a William Castle Tingler thing on your chair that I can control on my end.
Just go,
so when you start, when you start going on a rant, I can hit it and shock your ass back on track.
Yeah. Eventually be like Pavlovian. I'll be so afraid of the shock. Anytime I have a thought beyond I must just repeat the corporate line that, but I will say this to your point, the reason why I love collecting, because I got away from collecting, full disclosure. I'm not going to be a poser. Like I've been collecting for 20 years and I've got tens of thousands of, I don't, because I used to have quite a few tapes, got rid of them all when DVD came out, started stockpiling DVD, got rid of a lot of that. Now, I still have quite a few, not like tons, but I've got some of my DVD collection, my original collection. But I did the whole thing for a while there where I got rid of all the boxes because my wife and I were both, we had so much stuff for a while there. We've got 3 kids. It became like I got very much into minimalism and the idea of clearance stuff. And honestly, I still like doing it every once in a while. So now that I'm recollecting, I'm trying to be very intentional. Now I got to be careful because recently there was a place in St. Pete that we didn't get to cover in those videos that we shot recently, Tyson. But I picked up quite a few VHS tapes. They were $1 a piece. But I'm looking through going, honestly, I mean, I like them because of that they're tapes and that they don't make this on tape anymore. I get that. But honestly, one of the things you and I've talked about is starting to do giveaways and things for the show when I get excess stuff into the shop because I don't want it to get overflowing. And I'm trying to be very intentional with the stuff I keep for me, myself, and I. That being said, there is the thrill of the hunt, which is obviously the name of some of our videos, is all what it's all about for me. Yes, streaming is convenient. It's great. I love lots of aspects. I'm not going to be one of these people who pretends I don't ever go. No, of course I do. I mean, that'd be a lie. But I feel like there's something about knowing they don't make this anymore. It's not going to, and it won't exist forever. It's got a shelf life. No matter 100 years from now, these tapes may not even be functional. And so there's something about the fact that it's not forever. You know what I mean? I feel like there's a better word, and you being the writer can help me on this. But I feel like there's something about things that are temporary. And I like that about
There's
this.
a shelf life for
Yes.
this type of stuff, certainly.
I'm getting a drink, so keep
You know, it's
talking.
funny.
Hold on one second.
Yeah, well, and what I was going to say is one of the things that hit me the other day that we haven't really talked about, but I was watching. I'm not going to tell you what I was watching because, again, I think it's something that we've either covered or we were going to cover, and I don't want to spoil anything. So suffice it to say, I was watching something on VHS, and there was a solid probably 8 minutes worth of previews at the beginning of it, which I can remember back in the day. I mean, how pissed off did you used to be when you would rent something and pop it in, like, oh, just come on with the feature presentation already. But now I love that because I mean, there's an entire generation of people that have no concept. I mean, unless they go to the theater, you know, obviously then they know what a preview is, but you know, that rental experience. I mean, there's so many things that I would run back. I would rent something on Friday, watch the movie, and then run back to the video store on Saturday to rent something else based strictly on what I saw in the previews the night before. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
and by the way, that
would
be a fun bit, and I don't know if I should call it a bit. It's not like we're doing it for comedic sake, but a fun thing to do occasionally on here as well would be to do like a watch of the trailers that would randomly appear at like not even going blind. We don't know what it's going to be, but then you know, what do we get? Like, you know, and it'd be like, you know, 10, 15 minutes, but just getting to see like what those trailers were. And I know we'll, I'm sure, get into this as the show progresses, but we have this whole issue with trailers. I'm addicted to them. Tyson has managed to break that addiction. And I will complain about how, especially modern trailers. I mean, trailers have kind of ruined movies for a long time, to be fair, but I definitely will complain about it more now. But to which Tyson points out, hey, don't watch the trailer, dummy. And so we have this.
Put the bottle down, man.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do.
If I'm feeling the temptation, I'm getting the shakes. He points out I should just call him. You know, he's my sponsor. But that being said, I still occasionally, when a new trailer comes out, I would love to cover on the channel. He won't watch it. Oh, sorry. He won't watch it, but I probably will, depending on the movie. Now, a lot of times I'll start a trailer, and if I feel like it's giving too much away, I'll stop it. I just want the tone. I want the vibe. So there might be some of that going on. I don't know. But I would love to, like, you know, do that as well. But anyway, now I'm getting off track. See, this is what happens, kids. Those of you that listen to Retro Movie Geek,
I was about to reel you in.
Yeah.
But, the last thing I'm going to say about the trailers is the interesting thing about this one that I watched the other day is, and I can remember this growing up too, is I could remember I used to rent the same movies so often that just based on the trailers that they showed, you know, like I remember, oh yeah, I remember these 3 previews.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Every time, and that happened to me the other day. I started watching. I'm like, oh god, I knew exactly what the 3rd preview was going to be, even though I hadn't seen the VHS version of this movie in 25 years. Just because I had rented it so much, I'm like, God, I know what this, you know, I know exactly what this is gonna be. So I don't know.
Well, I would say
diving down a nostalgic rabbit hole.
Well, speaking of nostalgia, perhaps it's time for our main event. Perhaps we should rank horror icons of the 80s, with the exception of
that aren't Freddy, Jason, or Michael.
Correct. Or, and by the way, also full disclosure, Leatherface would not be on here because we both agreed. And honestly, Michael, you could make this argument for as well, even though the bulk of his movies were the 80s and into the 90s, that both of them started in the 70s. So I feel
they were
like
introduced in the 70s. So I'm with you. I don't count them as being an 80s.
I think people, if we did Michael, I think we'd be forgiven by most people because, again, I think they think of him as being more of an 80s horror icon. But to be fair, 78 is not 80. So, but yeah, definitely Jason, not Jason, definitely not Freddy. As much as I love both of them, we are not going there. And so here's what we're going to do, how we're going to have to do this, Tyson. So we, thanks to Tyson, we have a little sort of virtual slideshow that can accompany us as we do this. But I'm going to have to add them as we go, I think, because as soon as I click it, I think it's going to appear. I could be wrong on that, but so I'm going to go to, do you know, you tell me, do you happen to have the list in front of you?
I can have the list in front of me, but that's what I was going to say. Technically, this is in no particular order, right? Because we didn't have the mental capacity between the two of us to stress ourselves out trying to rank these from like 10 to 1 or anything. We just decided to just throw them out there and we'll cover them. So you tell me what you need from me.
Okay, well, how about you bring up the list, because I'll start with the first one you have on here, and then you could just go ahead and after that you announce what it is, and I'll click on that video to bring it up. How's that sound?
Okay, so you're gonna bring it into our little virtual dashboard here so that I'll know, and then I can introduce it.
So do you want to pick the first one, or okay, you pick the first one. You just tell me what it is, and I'll pick the video. We'll go with that. Which, by the way, everyone understands. We've said it before. We'll say it again. This is not any particular order. This is not like 10 to 1, nothing like that. It's just these are our, we're ranking these as like in a top 10 kind of thing. Like these should be in people's consideration for iconic horror. And again, a couple of them go without saying. You'll know it when you see it, but we'll get there.
Well, and I think just going down the list here, Joel, we'll start with a few of the obvious ones and maybe get them out of the way.
Okay.
How about
Let's do it. How about the most obvious? There's one of these I feel like is the most obvious.
Let's start with the first one then. Everybody's favorite childhood toy, one Charles Lee Ray, a.k.a. Chucky.
There he is. There he is. And yes, so I think, again, it goes without saying, this, if we had done a just general top 10 list of horror icons, he would obviously be on it, in my opinion. I'm a big fan of Child's Play movies. I know a lot of people do not share that feeling, mainly because once you get past 3, it goes into some different tonal territory, to say the least. That being said, I love the first 3. I actually do. And yes, I include the military school part 3 in that. But
yeah,
I remember I saw Bride of Chucky. I think you know what's funny? Seed of Chucky, I feel like I saw part of, and like something came up and I just never went back to it. And I didn't really care. Cause I remember the problem I had with Bride, I liked some of the creativity that they were going for, but it did start to get wacky. And I know this is like superficial as all get out, but my biggest gripe with the post part 3 movies was the look of Chucky himself. Like, I like when he's just a normal looking doll. And I know they eventually get back to that to some degree, but I prefer that. You know what I mean? When he's like not all like Frankenstein monstered up.
And I think that's the reimaginings and the most recent television series. I feel like you certainly aren't alone in that feeling. And that's probably why the filmmakers made the decision they did to kind of go back to that traditional good guys sort of look. Yeah.
Yeah.
And is it just me, or this particular picture that's up, does he remind you a little bit of like a Sam Kinison?
Yes.
Like I would have nightmares about Sam Kinison.
Actually, he really reminds me of, and this is a no-brainer for anybody from the Tampa Bay area, having been a Bucks fan. I started, the Bucks were created the same year I was. They won the Super Bowl on my 27th birthday. I was not a football fan or a sports fan, even though I played like high school football. It was like, I kind of did that because long story short, my dad was into football. He was fair. He's like, oh, I want you to try 1 year, but you can't quit. You have to go 1 year. And then I refused to quit because even though my love was with movies and video productions, and I was sort of like the weird oddball on the football team who didn't get to play that much. I knew how the coaches and everybody talked about the guys who did quit. So it was like, I was just to spite them, I was willing to put myself through hell. That's a whole other discussion about a problem that I have. But that being said, Chucky always reminds me of John Gruden, Coach Gruden from the Tampa Bay Bucks.
I got you.
That was his nickname around these parts. I'm sure I think even when he was a coach of the Raiders, I think they called him, whoops, I'm knocking my camera around. They called him Chucky, and believe me, there's pictures of him yelling, and that's exactly what it looks like. So
look, exactly.
That look, exactly. Yeah. All right. So what's our next pick?
Here's one that's maybe not as obvious and certainly not a franchise installment, but let's go with the caretaker for the Overlook Hotel and one Mr. Jack Torrance.
Indeed. There he is. Old Jackie boy. Yeah, The Shining is a classic. It goes without saying. I know if Matt is watching this, he loves it. I know that sorry, I just got rid of. See, this is how we learn, kids. Back to, I was trying to get rid of Chucky, and I got rid of Jack. Hold on. I'm going to get rid of Chucky now and add him back to the stream. Here we go. That's what I wanted. I know that Raul went on, or I can't remember. I think, did he go on with Matt or did Matt go on with him? I can't remember which show was which. Headlong into Monsters is Raul. Father Son Watch Horror is Matt. But either way, I know that they had a bit of a issue because Matt loves The Shining. Raul does not, unless I'm completely messing that up, but I'm pretty sure that's how it went. I love The Shining. I think it's a fantastic movie. It is not in my top 10. It is not in my top 10. Where does it rank for you?
I would not put it in my top 10 either. My relationship with Stephen King adaptations is a difficult one. I feel like it's so hard, and people say this all the time about trying to adapt H.P. Lovecraft pieces, where it's almost like they're so big that you just can't get it right. And I feel that way about a lot of Stephen King's work. Not that they're, like with Lovecraft, you've got like In the Mouth of Madness or the Mountains of Madness. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you, and every Lovecraftian character is so horrible that it's indescribable. I mean, that was kind of the joke with them, right? Where it's, if you even try to describe this, if you look at it, you will go crazy. So how do you visually put that on?
Yeah. How do you
film?
put that without driving your audience insane?
Exactly. But I feel like with Stephen King stuff, one of the things I love about his written work is that the way he describes things and scenes, like, man, the mental picture that the reader is able to paint in their own mind, at least for me personally, based on what I'm reading, it's almost like it's just destined to be a disappointment when I see somebody try to do that on film. Now, when it comes to The Shining, there's the whole, again, if you're watching this show, chances are you're a fan of the genre, and you know that there was a little bit of tension between Stanley Kubrick and Stephen King. And if you've read The Shining and you've seen the film adaptation, you know that the stories aren't exactly what you would call, what's the word I'm looking for? Not conducive, but the movie don't exactly follow the book.
Not even.
I mean.
Well, I mean, I would say it does in some ways, I guess, right? But not. Now, full disclosure, I've never read The Shining. I know it's shocking. I haven't, never read it, but I do. Know enough about the changes.
I would say that it's like maybe 40%. What you see in The Shining is maybe 40% of what. Yeah, trust me. The ending is different. The characters are. Yeah, you've never read you've never read The Shining.
I think we've established this. I take forever to read books. For nonfiction, I usually fly through if I have the time to read. Fiction, and I've always been King was always the one I read when as a kid, like so many of us. But unless it was a short story, it usually takes me forever and a day. I read Pet Sematary, I read Misery, I read The Dark Half. There's a few, but I haven't read like all the Stephen King novels by any stretch. I've seen all the movies. I've read a ton about the books. I feel like I've got enough of an overview. I think the Cliff Notes version of a lot of them. But yeah, no, I never read The Shining. But I do know the other thing with problem with Kubrick is the director on this, from what I understand it, I mean, we could go down the whole road with like the Shelley Duvall experience and how he treated her and like whether or not that actually had a detrimental effect on her later in life even. But he's such a control freak. Like he's like a genius, but like so many geniuses, he's a total douchebag who does really horrible things and treats people like garbage, in my opinion. I'm not trying to defame his character. I know he's no longer with us. I'm just simply saying, in my opinion, to treat people the way I have heard people were treated, I think is horrible. So that set aside, I feel like with this movie in particular, it almost feels like he went out of his way to go against like the most minuscule things. Like he didn't have to change them, but he was just always like a dig at King. You know what I mean? Like that's what it always felt like to me.
Well, and I think to your point, it's still made for one hell of a horror movie. So I agree with you.
It did. Oh, it's a great movie. It's fantastic. Yeah. All right. So you want to go to our next one? Yeah.
If that's all we've got for.
I mean,
Mr.
pretty much.
Torrance.
Because I feel like there's a few other ones that I'm going to want to talk about more.
Joel, give me 1 second. We're gonna have to cut this part.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, for the purpose, you do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. Because for the purposes of the stream, because if this was a live stream, we couldn't cut. For instance, as everyone we have established on Retro Movie Geek, when I drink these. It's never smart, and I haven't drank very much, but I'm already feeling it. But that's okay. I am a champ. I am a soldier. I am a warrior, at least in my own mind. I can make it. And while you're doing
what do you want me to do then?
So do you need to go? Do you need to do something?
Just like 30 seconds.
Go for
I'll
it.
be
Yeah.
back.
You do the thing where you hide your camera so we can see how that works. So like I said, folks, this is
Okay.
an experiment that we are trying here. I will let's see here. What can I talk to the folks about? You know what? Actually, I'm going to do while he's doing that. Yeah, I'm not going to mess this up because this segment I will actually be putting out on its own, and we'll have probably cut this section out of it. Perhaps, maybe, who knows? So let's see. What do I want to say about The Shining? Let's talk about Shelley Duvall. Let's talk about it. So there is I think it's called Grim Life Collective is the YouTube channel. If I remember, I'll have Tyson link it in the show notes. But they did a really fantastic interview with her from not that long ago. And if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. I believe it's it's a husband and wife team, I believe. And they go around to a bunch of different cool sites and they talk about different things, both like locations of where true crime has happened, but also places where like movie locations, stuff like that. But they had an interview with her that really sends home like a lot of the things that she's been through. Like I'm talking about Shelley Duvall. I figured this is my opportunity. Whenever
Gotcha.
you leave, that's when I'll use the opportunity to rant for a minute. So you don't have to listen.
Oh yeah, something tells me you'll have no problem coming up with filler while I have to.
Shockingly,
for a minute.
probably not. So that being the case, Shelley Duvall was in an interview with a group called this husband and wife team. They're YouTubers called the Grim Life Collective. Tyson is what I was telling everybody about. Definitely worth checking. If we can remember, I'll link directly. I or Tyson will link directly in the show notes for this. I keep talking about show notes. I guess it's description on YouTube for that particular interview because it was really great. It's a really, really sweet, touching interview that makes me kind of despise Kubrick as a person a little bit more. But that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other thing. All right. So what is our next pick? Do we have another pick?
We do. Again, this one will probably be obvious to some, but I would say this is the last of the more frequent flyers on any 80s icon ranking. And this would be everyone's favorite Cenobite and one of the high priests of hell, Pinhead.
Yes, there he is. There's old Penny Boy. And I know we've discussed this. Feelings about the new Hellraiser? You liked it, right?
I liked it. Yes.
I did too. I actually liked it. I know a lot of people hated it. I liked it. So, there we are.
Well,
I mean, the new...
we forget that it's not the first reimagining of the Pinhead character. And I think if you were to rank the Pinheads, the most recent installment certainly isn't at the bottom of the barrel, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's not like Dwayne Bradley has been the only one to ever play the role, right? I didn't see the later Hellraisers, but at some point Dwayne Bradley's not
Doug
Pinhead,
Bradley.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dwayne Bradley. What the hell am I saying? Doug Bradley. Thank you. See, by the way, how do you know it's live? There you go.
I think because you've got and you've got Night of the Living Dead on the brain in the background.
Oh,
so
I have
Dwayne Jones.
Dwayne Jones, but also is Dwayne Bradley? Is that the name from another? Is that Belial's brother? Is that Belial and isn't Dwayne Bradley? Is that his name? I feel like it is. I don't have it in front of me.
Basket Case?
Yeah, Basket Case. Is it Dwayne? I know it's Dwayne and it's Belial, but
I don't know.
I feel like it's the Bradley brothers. Okay. Well, while you're yakking, I'll so tell me about Hellraiser. I'm gonna look it up because it's gonna annoy me.
No, I think that again, if you were to ask somebody to start rattling off 80s horror icons, chances are Pinhead isn't going to be number one or even number two, but I think at some point he shows up on everyone's list. So that's why we've got him on our list.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, I think most people recall that, in the first film, he was never referred to as Pinhead. And in fact, in the credits was not even credited as Pinhead. I think it was just lead Cenobite or something like that. But I think that, to talk about Clive Barker and his contributions to horror, again, to bring in another famous and author that I adore, I think it's an understatement to say that he's influenced the genre, probably as much as Stephen King has. But the thing I love about Barker is it's a different feel. You know what I mean? With Stephen King, you've got he makes the everyday horrific, right? He makes the folks next door or a car or the family dog horrific, right? With Clive Barker,
spoiler alert for our list.
Go ahead. Exactly. We'll get to him. But the cool thing about Clive Barker, is everything that he's given us in the horror world is strictly from his own like warped consciousness. You know what I mean? From the gates and pits of hell. It's not exactly like you're going to find any of this stuff living down. Well, I mean, you could potentially, I guess, find this living down the street from you, but it's just a different. It's just a different ball game altogether when you get into the Barker horror stuff.
Yeah. And by the way, I was correct. Dwayne Bradley is the Kevin Hintenrink. I'm sorry, Mr. Kevin, Mr. Dwayne. I can always butcher your last name. But I will say that in my defense for why I was saying Dwayne Bradley instead of Doug Bradley is because originally we were creating this list. I did suggest Dwayne and Belial as horror icons. And who knows? I'm sure they'll show up at various other points because I freaking love those movies. All three of them. Let that be known.
Yeah, no, they're on the list. That's sad. I don't know how far down this list you want to go.
Oh, were they? I don't remember us putting on the list. Okay, never mind. Yeah. Did you do a?
I didn't do a master list. I think I'm just going down what I came up with and then what you came up. So that's why we said in no particular order.
Okay, so are you covering everything we came up with, or just the ones we have slideshows for?
I got slideshows for everything.
Oh, did you? I only. Oh crap! Well, then maybe at some point I'm gonna have to take the wheel because I only downloaded like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then your surprise one and my surprise one. So that's 12.
Okay. Well, then
I didn't know you had. I only was going to do 10. I didn't know we were going to do more than that. Well,
do you want to keep going till the wheels come off this thing, and then we'll figure out how to get past
I would say this. How about this? Since you are going on unlimited information here, since I didn't realize, I apologize. Totally on me. What I'll do is then I will, because I don't want to spoil. Which of course I just did acknowledge that Basket Case might be on a future list, but we could break this up and do it over 2 different streams at some point. We'll do the other half on another one. So let me go ahead because I think you got the big ones, right? Those are the. How about you?
Why don't I throw it over to you, and you, since you know what we've got, why don't you take over for a little bit?
Normally I would want you to drive that, but and no pun intended with the next one I'm going to pick. But yeah, I think only because I only have the slideshows available to us that are covering just 10. So, all right. So next up, you've already kind of alluded to it. We picked as one of the ones that should be obviously an icon of horror, the one and only, that little Fury herself, Christine. It is
the 1958 Plymouth Fury.
Yep. And I think you and I talked about this in our personal lives. The 1957 Chevy Bel Air is like my cherry red. One of my probably my favorite overall car of all time. And as a kid, I thought it was the same car. But then I realized as I got older, I was like, oh. And then, of course, the fact it's a Plymouth Fury. I love King, but that is so like on the nose. It's like,
exactly.
I guess it's obvious. You got to do it. But yeah, no, obviously. Okay, so it goes without saying, Christine. My earliest memory of this movie, by the way, is I would love for my friend Gamma to tell me if I'm wrong on this. But there was a show hosted by Leonard Nimoy that he and I both loved. He's older than I am. I won't say by how much, Gamma, but I watched it when I was like 7, 8 years old. It was like a behind the scenes making of show. And that's my earliest memories of like, they had like a behind the scenes of when Octopussy came out in 83, Jedi, when it came out, like movies like that. But I have this memory, and I could be wrong. I'm almost positive it was from that show of the behind the scenes of Christine, because that's 83. So it was either that show or maybe like a behind the scenes on HBO or something, because we had HBO when I was a little kid. Yeah. But I feel like it was Lights, Camera, Action was the one.
So my attachment to Christine, it goes back to, really my developmental, it's probably 12 or 13. So Christine was the first Stephen King book I ever read. Mm-hmm. And like, while I was discovering the literature of Stephen King, I was also getting into cars and hot rods. So I was reading a book about a 58 Plymouth Fury and starting to understand how cool that was. And then realized, and I think I had seen Christine as a younger child and didn't appreciate or even realize what I had been watching. But obviously then when I realized, oh, there's a movie called Christine, while I'm reading the book and into hot rods, I've got to see that. And then when the title came up, I'm like, oh my God, John Carpenter did this movie, the same guy that did Halloween. So like all this came like hit me at one time. So that's why I have this immense love of Christine. This was one that I may or may not have allegedly made a bootleg copy of when I was a
hypothetically, theoretically.
Wouldn't it be cool too if I still got it on the shelf?
That would be pretty cool.
I think. I bet I do somewhere.
Yeah. Well, one time you have to dig it out.
Anyway,
I actually think it'd be fun to like try that because I still have some VHS tapes that I've had since I was in high school. So, yeah.
Oh, I do too. Yeah, for sure. But point is, man, I wore this copy down. Like I watched this so many times. The soundtrack, I mean, it's John Carpenter, of course, so it's gonna have it, but it's also a Stephen King movie. So combine all that, and it's one hell of a kick-ass soundtrack. So that's yes, I love this movie. I love the car.
Yeah, I was gonna say that one sequence alone, I'll call it the rebuilding scene. Knowing that this is like many years pre-CGI and like how cool that it looks awesome. Like I remember I haven't seen this movie in a long time, and I'd love to revisit it soon with my kids. Actually, I think they would dig it. It's a fantastic movie. I love that movie. And Christine's is iconic.
School practical effects.
Totally.
I think that scene you're talking about. I remember because I think it's the DVD I've got maybe has some behind the scenes or commentary or something. And John Carpenter said they just shot it in reverse, used cables and pulleys and. I mean, I don't want to spoil too much if folks haven't seen it. It's probably not that hard to figure out what happens. But for your sake, Joel, I think that was just as simple as filming it in reverse and pulling pieces here and there. And again, it's one of those that if you've read the book to get back. Yeah, I think maybe today with CGI you could get away with a lot more. But you got to respect for the day that Carpenter was able to do what he was with it. But it's another one of those cases where if you read the book, there's just so much in there that it's so hard to get on to film and translate. You know what I mean? Like they really don't touch much on in the movie the original owner of the vehicle. Now it's his brother that sells him the car in the film, right? But in the book, you get so much of the backstory of the original, the guy that bought the car new in '58 and his story that which
could almost be a prequel, like it'd be a prequel movie in and of itself if they wanted.
And I heard
there.
Once upon a time where rumor had it that Stephen King was considering writing I don't think a prequel. I think it was going to be a sequel to Christine, much like he did with like Dr. Sleep, and The Shining. So I would die if that actually comes to fruition.
Which obviously was not from a Buick 8 is not related in any way, shape, or form, right?
No.
Okay. Just checking.
Did you read From a Buick 8?
No. Hence why I was asking.
Okay. Yeah. Another great, and that's even with his short stories and stuff, it's Christine is not the only possessed lethal car story that King has come up with. I, for one, support all of that sub genre that we can get.
For sure. All right. Well, you know what? Let's keep it in the King vein, so we'll get all the King stuff out of the way. Because here's the thing: I'm older than you by a smidge, but I think you and I both grew up like heavily impacted and influenced by King. It was just It's almost like if you didn't grow up in that time, it's one of those things that's hard to really realize how much in the zeitgeist, especially at specific times, I feel like early 80s. And early 90s, there was these windows where it was just like everything. It's like constant adaptations.
And you know what else is weird about that? And I've thought about this often with Stephen King. He's considerably older than we are. And all of his books, most of the film adaptations were about, it's about kids and it's about his youth and his time as a child, which by and large was the 50s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So why were those of us that were the age of many of his characters, in the 80s, what was it about the stories set in the 50s that we found so compelling, and so entertaining?
Yeah, I think, I was gonna say, I think, well, that also probably lends to the idea of like, why is there so much stuff that takes place in the 80s now? Right? Like Stranger Things, right? The reason and I think because there's something about the nostalgia goggles people put on about an era, right? We only remember the good stuff by and large, which is why I think something like Stranger Things works so well, and why King stuff in my opinion, works so well is because, yes, there is a hint of the nostalgia, but it's like bittersweet because truthfully, the good old days weren't always so good. Not to quote, was it Billy Joel? Isn't that a Billy Joel song? And I think that, but to your point, like my dad grew up in, like he was about the same age as King, maybe a hair older. And so he grew up in that same time frame. And yeah, so there was definitely a lot, you could see the influence of the previous generations on the movies that you and the TV and the show and the books rather that you and I and people our age grew up with was very, very, very much influenced by their childhoods. And so now that's where we are, I think, to a large degree today. But on that note, this is one that was obviously very much always mentioned when I was a kid. And that is Cujo. I remember tons of people. Like, this is one of those movies.
Such a sweet puppy.
He is. So look at that face.
Look at
that. Oh. Okay. Would it be great? That's the one where you're like, oh, look. He wants to hug her.
Oh,
he's supposed to throw his paws over.
And kisses.
Oh, look at that. His ruddy chins. His ruddy cheeks. Was it ruddy with the red? So Cujo for me is that one of those movies. I think this one, The Exorcist, Alligator. There's a few movies where as a kid, I'd hear older kids talking about them and describing the scenes. And so in my head, they were probably more horrific even than when I finally saw them. Cujo was definitely one of those movies for me.
Well, and we've established on other shows that you've had me on before that I was thrust into the deep end of the public horror pool at way too young an age. And I can remember watching Cujo, dude, when I was, I don't know, maybe 5.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, what year did Cujo come out?
83.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was born in 82, so
God, you're
obviously
young.
I don't remember when it first came out, but
I have vague memories of 1982.
Yeah, I do not, but I do remember seriously being like, I mean, come on, 5.
Yeah, that's
Cujo
really young.
No
that would be traumatizing
to be watching.
Yeah,
so.
Especially since it deals with like a
6-year-old.
6-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a wonder that I didn't grow up to have a abnormal fear of dogs.
Yeah.
But see that on the flip side though, the way I'm today, like there's no way I would survive a remake of Cujo because rabies or not, I would just want to give kisses and belly rubs and my larynx would be ripped out. And
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Horrific fashion because that's just how I am. But
what I think
what a great character though. This goes
back
to what I was saying about Stephen King taking the comfortable and making it incredibly uncomfortable, because up till now, sure, there was scary dogs and there was junkyard dogs and there was security dogs and dogs that got rabies, you know what I mean? But nobody had taken that and built an entire horror novel around that and made it, what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I also feel like if they made this movie much like Christine today, they would just CGI a lot of it. And let's be honest, it's almost like, here's the thing. I'm not one of these people who just hates on CGI to hate on it. Okay. It can be a very effective tool. The problem I have is when it's all CGI, all I'm thinking the whole time is it's like I'm watching an animated movie. Like there's no, and not even like a good, like classic Disney 2D animation where, people like by hand. It's not that they aren't artists in their own right when the design and everything was CGI, but the problem I've got is, to me, the magic, it's like it's all ones and zeros. It's not, whereas if I know there's no CGI involved, that's a real dog. How are they making that dog seem that way? I have to, it's like a magic trick, right? If I'm watching a magic trick on television or in a movie, I'm not like, oh, I'm blood, because it's like you can cut, you can hide stuff way easy. If I'm watching it in front of my eyes, right, it's going to be a whole different reaction. So I feel similarly to this kind of stuff, like Christine and Cujo and movies like this. When I watch, it's like you find out how the trick is done, but there's still like just the artistry and the craft involved in that and how much more difficult it was to pull off. Plus, I find it super ironic, and my kids and I have discussed this, that I thought CGI was supposed to make it to where fewer people were needed to make a movie. Whereas, I don't know if you sat through the end credits of any movie made in the last 10 years, but there's like, it takes 20 minutes for the freaking credits to end, to the point where they're all like, there's like 8 names, going across the screen this way. You can't read any of them. And so there's so many people.
Yeah.
And well, it's great that those people have jobs. I don't know, it loses something for me as a film fan. That's just what I'm saying. So don't want to do, I'm seeing, like, I pulled myself in. I almost went on a rant. I felt it growing. And then I think I pulled it back. So
yeah, I was about to hit the button. I was about to hit the tingler button.
I felt you. I felt I sensed you tingling. And so if I look behind me, that's because Night of the Living Dead, I'm sure those who are watching have figured this out, has been playing. The originals are playing in the background as a way, both because we love the idea of like old movies playing, obviously in the shop. Like when you'd go back in the day to a video store, they'd always have a movie or something on. Definitely want to keep that going, but it's also a great way for us to remember how long we've been doing this, if we know how long the movie was. So next up, I'm going to pick this one because I know it's a favorite of both of ours, but especially you. I mean, I love it, but I know you do even maybe more than I do. And you'll have more to say because I will also be dipping out for like a split second because, as we've established.
Oh, way to put me on the spot.
Yeah. Okay. You'll believe me when you see what I pick. You'll be fine. All right. Here we go.
All right. What do we got?
Here we go. Next up on the list, the one and only Fright Night.
Jerry Dandridge.
Yes, sir.
Suavest, sexiest vampire since
Nosferatu.
Right.
It's Max Shrek. It's Max Shrek and Nosferatu.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I will say this. Go. Let me just kick it off at the beginning, only because I'm going to then mute myself and run off to hit the loo, and then I'll be right back. So Fright Night, and I know I've told you this story, and I've probably told it on another podcast, but I'll just restate it here. Early memory, my cousin Chris, my older cousin, he was my horror. He's sort of he and my friend, my best friends Jail and Wade growing up were all like my gateway into horror. And also my other best friends John and Jeff were also gateway into a lot of the more intense horror for me. But this movie, my cousin Chris rented. It must have been right after it came on video. So I don't know if that was like late 85, early 86. It's in that time frame. I'm like 9, 10 years old. And I remember for whatever reason, I had already seen Creepers, aka Phenomena, with him at that point, no doubt. I'm pretty sure they would have been very close together that we rented these. That one I sat through, and maybe it was because of my reaction to that one. I remember him kicking me out of the room on this one. And I don't know why. Like and within a year or two later, he'd watch Friday the 13th with me and everything else. But for some reason, this one, either he or his parents or both, they're like, oh, you need to go. So I remember catching just like a little bit. And then I kept like trying to sneak in like the little kid thing where you're like,
there's
gotta go
some brief
to the bathroom.
nudity. Do you think it was the nudity part of it?
Not my uncle and aunt. They didn't care about that stuff. So no, I doubt it. It was, I think it was probably because I remember my uncle telling me, because I would get like I was a super sensitive kid. So I would get upset. He's like, look, Joel, if you're going to react to these, I'm not going to let you watch them. Because you don't want to listen to me whining about it. I don't blame him.
React.
Yeah. Don't react and don't snitch on us like you snitch to your mom on your dad.
I wonder what it would have been. I mean, I guess some of the effects though, there's some gruesome scenes. Yeah. I mean, I hope we're not spoiling this for anybody that hasn't seen Fright Night. Again, I have to assume that if they're watching a show,
anybody who sat through this particular ranking, they've seen all these movies.
Yes.
But yeah, I will say with Fright Night though, that's my earliest memory of it, and then I would see it shortly thereafter. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I love everybody in it. I love everything about it. I honestly have nothing negative to say. So on that note, I will let you take the wand, and then I will be right back.
Go take your potty break. Yeah, so much like I hinted to with Cujo, I saw Fright Night at probably way too young an age. I think this one was thanks to my uncle. I had an uncle that used to rent stuff, and between him and babysitters, my mom and dad would leave me with babysitters that would rent movies and bring movies over when they would watch me, and most of them were wildly inappropriate for somebody my age to be watching, and that was the case with Fright Night. But probably my earliest vampire movie memory, I feel like, was Fright Night, and that's why I feel like any ranking of horror icons of the 80s list would not be complete without including Chris Sarandon as Jerry Dandridge. Again, just the cast was phenomenal with Peter Vincent. My God, why can't I think of his name? Joel's probably gonna have to edit this. My God. Peter Vincent. Can't think of his name. Anyway, Joel, fix all this because it's making me sound like an idiot. But William Ragsdale as Charlie Brewster, of course, Amanda Bierce of the other TV show, Married with Children. Good God, it's Marcy. So, and I had a chance to meet them at a convention not too long ago. Sweetest, both of them, William Ragsdale and Amanda Bierce, sweetest people. Stephen Jeffries as Evil Ed. But again, I think when it comes to just that suave vampire, I don't think you can beat Chris Sarandon. He just like oozed of 80s vampire, because up to then, during that time, the only other vampire movies, I hadn't seen Dracula yet at this young an age, but the only other ones I was renting like at the store would have been Hammer Draculas, Christopher Lee, and Christopher Lee's Dracula was very much a different type of vampire than Chris Sarandon's Jerry Dandridge, for sure. But again, soundtrack wise, Fright Night is such an 80s movie. It's a fantastic soundtrack. My favorite vampire movie, bar none. And I argue this all the time. The main theme for Fright Night, and I think the song is it Come to Me, that Brad Fidel composed. I challenge anyone to find a sexier song than that particular theme.
I heard you say that. Yes, I agree with you. It's a sexy song.
It certainly is. And sexy. I know we said we weren't going to edit, but I totally got stumped. Peter Vincent.
Roddy McDowall,
the actor.
Roddy McDowall.
Good God, I couldn't think of his name.
That's okay. Dude, yes. You know why we're not going to edit? And here's the thing: is I said Dwayne Bradley instead of Doug Bradley,
and I couldn't think of Roddy McDowall.
That's okay. Well, this is part of getting old, folks. You're watching two dudes in their 40s do this. If you are actually sitting through this, deal with the repercussions.
Trying to remember shit on the fly. I'm telling
you.
So anyway, I was just going through the cast list and how everything from cast to soundtrack to just the look of Jerry Dandridge was just awesome 80s. And I had mentioned that, the only other vampire movies I was watching at this time was like Christopher Lee Hammer Draculas. So definitely a different type of vampire. And I really didn't appreciate the comedy side of Fright Night until I was much older. Like, I didn't get the humor. It was a scary flick for me when I was a kid.
It's such a simple.
We briefly touched before you left.
What were you gonna say? By the way, folks, just so you know, I think there's like the slightest with this stream thing. I think there's a slightest delay. So if suddenly I go silent and then he goes silent, we've already established how we're going to work this. But I just want to make sure everyone realizes we're trying our best not to like talk over each other and do all those kinds of annoying things. What were you gonna say, Tyson?
Well, the one thing I was going to kind of open up for discussion too was the effects in this. And, you had mentioned how your uncle or cousin or whoever wanted you to leave the room at one point. And there are several examples of great effects, but I think one of the grossest is the Billy Cole death scene on the stairs where he basically just freaking melts. You know what I mean?
It's awesome. See, I would have been, as a kid, I would have been more affected by Amy's, let's just say her facial qualities, because it freaked me out. Dude. I remember that really scared the crap out of me. Stuff like that weird, like distortion of facial features. Like that just always like gave me the heebie-jeebies.
And I didn't realize this. I didn't realize this till much later though, and this will be a good thing to close on. But I didn't realize that the post transformation Amy, that those are total fake boobs that she's wearing apparently too.
Really? Oh
yeah, that's a chest piece, and I think she still has them like hanging around.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, Amanda Bierce is great. I freaking love Married with Children, so she's always been great to me.
Yeah, I had mentioned that these folks were at one of the conventions here in town not so long ago that I got.
Oh, really?
I got to meet, and Amanda Bierce, William Ragsdale, the sweetest. I was there for other reasons, so I kind of got to hit the convention floor a little bit earlier than the public opened, so they weren't really set up yet. And she was cool enough where I like kind of snuck over and got her to sign my Fright Night poster and took some pictures with her before everybody else.
That's cool, man.
And I think she's a fairly local girl. I think she grew up in the Orlando or Tampa area, maybe, because we were talking about the Enzion, because it just so happened that my buddy Chris and I had seen a 35 millimeter print of Fright Night like the weekend before this
Okay.
convention. So we
Yeah.
were talking to her about that. And she's like, where did you get your hands? You know, where'd you see that? We said, oh, there's this little theater in Enzion. She's like, oh yeah. She's like, I grew up. She's like, I know where the Enzion is. You know.
Oh,
So,
that's awesome, man.
yeah,
That's
very
cool. I didn't
cool.
realize that. Yeah, you know, I always, like I said, I always loved her on Married with Children. Her back and forth with Al Bundy was always the
Right.
best. So, all right. So let's move to our next one that I know you and I are both massive fans of. Booyah! Because of course,
Pumpkinhead.
Yeah. Ed Harley. You do it better than I do.
Did you think it was gonna be easy, Ed Harley?
If you've never seen Pumpkinhead,
What's done can't be undone.
If you have not seen this movie, seriously, this movie is phenomenal. Like I every time I rewatch it, I love it even more. It's one of those movies for me.
Yeah.
When I stayed up in the mountains this last October with my family, my kids, and my wife, we watched this. They had never seen it before, and they're just starting to get that age. Like we're somewhat careful, like we don't just let them watch anything. But as they've gotten older, you know, and I feel bad for my oldest because you know he's old enough to see a lot of stuff at this point. I mean, hell, when I was his age, my God, the stuff I had already seen. But
right,
we have our youngest kid, and so we're like, okay, he's still well, you know, not young, but he's not like, you know, there's certain things, and also there's a freak out factor that. You know, they're still there, but there's certain movies like I feel like Pumpkinhead is, you know, they know how the effects are all done at this point. It's not going to really freak them out. But I made sure we watched it while in the Appalachian Mountains of Western North Carolina because it's perfect to watch there. So yeah,
well,
it's fantastic.
I was gonna say you're kind of hinting at that too. Where you know I have a love for movies about witchcraft and about folk horror, and I don't think a lot of people would think of Pumpkinhead being part of the folk horror genre, but I absolutely think it's got a place.
Oh yeah, 100%, dude. I think it absolutely does. Yeah, yes, it does.
Sure.
It's such a great movie. It's just
I know that they did for a while there. I think there's a Pumpkinhead comic book floating around somewhere, but this is one of those where I would love to, and I may be. This may be in existence and I just don't realize it, but I would love to read a novelization or like a prequel, you know what I mean? A book version of Pumpkinhead and the backstory and how far back does it go, you know?
Yeah, it's also just the effect, the Stan Winston monster, or Stan Winston directed it, which I always for some reason I always forget that, and then I rewatch it, I'm like, oh, that's right, Stan Winston, because he also did a movie that I know it's called A Gnome, but I love to call it A Gnome Named Gnorm. And I don't know if you've ever seen A Gnome Named Gnorm with Anthony Michael Hall. It is worth the price of admission. We covered it on Forgotten Flicks many years ago. But yeah, this movie, however, is fantastic. Right. I always feel like this would have been awesome if he had pulled like an Edward Robinson, who I believe did Night of the Hunter. If you've ever seen that film, which is a fantastic film with Robert Mitchum. Like with that was his only movie, though, right? That he directed. That was his only. He was an actor, did that one movie, and it's sort of like I always feel like there's something kind of baller about that when you make just one movie, and the movie you make always gives this sense of like, my God, what else could he have done? Is
discussed almost 40 years later, and we're talking about it on a 80s horror icon show.
Or you could make a mistake, or you could make the mistake of making a fantastic film like Pumpkinhead and then doing A Gnome Named Norm. I think it can also go that way too. So yeah.
You know, other than Stan Winston too, you know, you forget that with a name like that, it's hard to see past Stan Winston in the credits. But this was Tom Woodruff Jr., I think, was involved in the creature design as well.
You're right. Yep.
So I mean, there's a pretty good pedigree with the effects here. But I just like he's just so the Pumpkinhead demon, you know, is just. I mean, he's just brutal. I mean, it's a big lumbering thing. But I always remember the scene. Remember, he's got the chick's face and he's just like smashing it, like just up against the glass. Like people are inside the cabin and he's on the outside. And it's almost like he's got like that, like the sound effect is almost like a locust sound with him, or it's that it's like a chittering when he's around, and he's just like dragging it, basically like open the door. You know what I mean? And he's dragging her face across the glass. Like there's something brutal about him too that I love.
That's what there's so the brilliance of it is that it captures in this, you know, it's a real thing. It's a puppet that's there. And the way it captures like his sneering, like taunting, just menace is so freaking good, dude. It's so chef's kiss is what it is. It's great. It's just great. It's great.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of great, I think we should get to the next one. Not that I'm at all biased, being that this is in my top 10 horror movies of all time, usually in my top 3. Some people could argue it's a thriller. Screw that. It's a horror movie. Also part of a relatively short-lived franchise, 2 of the movies of which were in the 80s. So we're counting this one for sure. And that is the one, the only, The Stepfather. Jerry Blake. There he is. Terry O'Quinn himself. Folks, I was no way in hell that Gilman Joel was going to create a horror movie list and not have The Stepfather involved in some way, shape, or form. I love this movie. I have always loved this movie. It's funny. I have a stepfather, so I was actually afraid of renting this movie when it first came out because I did this thing a lot. And I feel like, I don't know if it was unique to me or if it's just something kids do, where anything that applies to your own life, you assume like if you watch the thing, it'll make that thing happen in your life. I used to do that a lot. And so I would avoid
anything that's slightly relatable.
Yeah. If I don't watch it, then maybe he won't murder me and my family in our sleep. Which thankfully turned out he was a good guy who didn't. So, but yeah, I ended up loving this movie. I remember seeing it in the video store. I'm trying to remember when I do. It's funny. As much as I love this movie, I cannot tell you like exactly when I first watched it. Like I know I remember seeing it in the store. I remember renting it, but I don't remember anything. Like there's some movies I can remember tell you exactly where I was. I remember exactly where I was.
I know that I was much older when I finally got around to seeing this, but I remember the box art scaring me as a child. I remember seeing the VHS box.
Her holding the dog, and then you see the silhouette of him with the knife above her. Is that the one?
I don't remember if it's that one
or the mirror.
Yeah, I think there's a knife. Yeah, I definitely remember the mirror.
Yeah, who are you here?
Got the knife in it.
Yeah. The one with the mirror, that poster, I didn't even realize, because the box I always knew, and I have that poster as well. It's like it's the one where it's actually the original poster with him in front of the mirror, where it's him looking at himself and like he's dressed differently from the image in the mirror. It's more like the image from the original of the movie. And it says like written into the fog. It says like, who are you here or who are we here with a question mark, which is a famous line from the movie. That poster I didn't even realize about until like later after being a fan of the movie. And I ended up buying it because I love that poster so much. The original box art I do love because it's like the nostalgia factor. But when you look at it, compared design wise, it's not nearly as good as that poster. Like that original poster with him in front of the mirror is so fantastic. So iconic. By the way, I'm also a huge fan of 2 and 3. Yes, 3 is not perfect. You've seen 3, right? Did you watch it not that long ago?
I don't know that I finished 3.
Oh,
I don't remember how far I got into it.
Tyson,
why is the ending? Is the ending like I have to see it?
Ending is, I'm gonna tell you what. You know what the ending is? It's Halloween Ends level, and that's all I'm gonna say.
Oh, really?
And you'll know what I mean by that. Yeah, it ends in a similar fashion of memory.
All right, I'll have to rewatch
yeah.
it then.
Yeah, but so 1 and 2 have Terry O'Quinn. 3 is a different actor. Yeah.
3 is the guy from
RoboCop 3?
I was going to say he's the guy from RoboCop 3. Yeah.
Is it the same guy?
Yep.
I can't remember if it's the same actor or not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Yeah. I'll side with you on this one. I'm not looking it up right now, so I don't know, but I do know that 1 and 2 I always loved, and 3 I enjoy for what it is. But 2, I actually, one of my early memories is, do you remember those pay-per-view channel where it would have the guide and they would like play trailers for movies you could order pay-per-view because they weren't available on cable yet? You remember that?
Yeah.
And so our pay-per-view, I remember they would, I remember when Pet Sematary came on pay-per-view and Lord of the Flies, the remake of that came on pay-per-view, like all these movies. And this one, I remember the short little like 20 or 30-second promo they would play. And I remember you know what's funny? That'd have been 89. I don't know that I had seen the original yet at that point. Now, I didn't do with this movie like I do with some other franchises where I'd see like later sequels and then go back and I always watch like Friday the 13th. I watched them all out of order originally. Same with like a lot of other movies. Although weirdly, Nightmare on Elm Street I think is the only series I watched them all in the correct order originally. But this one I did as well. But 2, I just remember that it's weird. I can remember sitting in our living room, the pay-per-view channel. Like anytime that promo came on, I was like something about it I just really loved. And so I would like go out of my way. Because you were on like a cycle, so you could figure out what came before it, and I would like flip back and forth to other things and then come back and knew it was about to come on just so I could watch it. But yeah, I remember when 2 came out, I didn't understand after seeing part 1 how 2 could exist, but it did. And it still works. I think 2 with it's Meg Foster, right? She's the lady with the awesome eyes who played Evil Lynn in Master of the Universe and They Live, right?
Is she
right?
is that the one where her son is an absolute asshole too?
That was 3, I think, is the one you hated, the son. There is a son in 2, and it's Jonathan Brandis. Remember Jonathan Brandis from Sequest?
Oh, right.
And Ladybugs and stuff like that. Yeah. And Never Ending Story Part 2.
He was
by the way, it's fun about...
and It, right?
Ahead, sorry.
Wasn't he in
And It? Yeah, he was Stuttering John Denenbrough. It was Bill. Stuttering Bill Denenbrough, right? Was that the character? And the one that John Boy ends up playing, Richard Thomas, right? Is that Richard Thomas? Is John Boy?
I would have said John Boy.
You just said John Boy. Hey, John Boy.
Yeah.
I love, by the way, that we're on video, so I can actually, when I say to people, I'm not looking the crap up in my head, which is why probably half of it is wrong.
And why I couldn't think of Roddy McDowell.
Right, you couldn't think of Roddy McDowell. See, it keeps us honest, Tyson.
Yeah.
No cheating. But yeah, so yeah. Anyway, needless to say, Stepfather, fantastic. If you have not seen this movie, or all 3 of them for that matter, we got him here in the shop on VHS. So definitely worth checking out. Although, weirdly, actually, I take it back. I have 2 and 3 here in the shop. I do not have 1 on VHS. I do not know why. I've never come. I probably could get off eBay, but I've tried to. It's one of those weirdly I want to kind of find in the wild. You know what I mean?
Do you have it on Blu-ray or DVD or something? I mean, some type of.
I have it.
media?
I think I have it on a couple different formats, but I don't have it on VHS, and that's. And I think I have Laserdisc. I have it on Laserdisc. I think. Huh?
Of course you do. I said, of course you do.
Yes, of course. But I don't have VHS. And that's because there are ones that I could get off eBay. This one and Creepers, aka Phenomenon, I really want to find in the wild. Like, I want to find them at a flea market or a garage sale, or, you know what I mean? I know it's going to be really hard to do. And eventually I'll probably end up getting them on eBay. But I don't know. There's something about the challenge of will I ever come across them? It's kind of fun. So anyway.
Sure.
So let's go. We're almost there. And we have a special guest. He's not waiting in the wings yet. I sent the link. Hopefully he gets it. Because we're getting close.
Is it Terry O'Quinn?
It is. I wish. No offense to the guest. The guest is still awesome to me, but no, that would be amazing. It's not Terry O'Quinn. So the second to last, before we share our surprise picks, that neither of us knows what the other one picked on those 2, will be an obvious, easy one. It is The Thing from The Thing. That is the iconic, the horror icon from the 80s. I feel like this movie, and honestly, this movie, depending on my mood, is my number 1. I think when I was in HMP, I made this my number 1. If I had to redo my list right this second, I don't know that it would be my number 1. I love this movie. Love it. Love it. It will always
you mean
be
of
my
all
top
time
10.
period?
Of all time horror period. Not all time. My all time favorite movie is Raiders. So that's period.
Yeah.
But
no, I meant your all time horror list.
Yes.
I can tell you, because I can't be put on the spot that way either, but I will tell you that The Thing is my favorite John Carpenter.
Yes, it was. That's what's funny. It's not depending on my mood. Escape from New York for me might be my favorite Carpenter, because I have such a strong connection to my dad and that movie, and I just love that movie. And I wish I had Snake Plissken's attitude about everything. So,
right.
But that being said, this is always in my top. This is my top 3. See, it's so hard, dude, because I always feel like Big Trouble, They Live, Escape, and this one, and then Halloween. I love Halloween, and it's all in Precinct 13. Those 6 are so close together in my mind that I can't. It's so hard to pick. It's so hard for me to pick from those. It's so hard. But yeah. So The Thing. It goes without saying. I don't even know we need to talk this one up. If you don't know The Thing, for God's sake, go see The Thing. Watch it, rent it, whatever. Rob Bottin's effects.
How old were you? How old were you when you saw The Thing?
Shockingly, not that young. Probably later teen, I'm sorry, my late preteen till early teens. Because my dad, this one, Alien and Black Christmas were the ones I remember my dad telling me about. Black Christmas, the original, the one that matters, and it's funny. Night of the Living Dead shut off. I could hear. I was about to ask you. Hear the noise? It's rewinding behind me. So when it's done, I might.
So now we know we hit.
Who knows?
90 minutes.
We did hit 90 minutes. We actually, just a hair over. So
remind me, because the story, it's too long to talk about here, but remind me to tell you my story about the first time I saw The Thing. And
you know what? Let's save it.
happened.
Let's
It's
save that,
too
and
big
I'll even save
Yeah.
like my memories of it. The point is, this is our let's get to the last one, and then we'll do our 2 surprise, and then hopefully our guest will be able to join us. We shall see. Let me see here.
For sure.
So let me see. I believe our next one, and by the way, these are literally just the list is in the order that I saved them when you sent them. So that's why there's no particular order to this. The last one is funny because I feel like this is more of a general iconic monster because but arguably the 2 best, other than the one that we all know and love, the 2 best movies related to this monster came out in the 80s. I know where.
I know where.
You know where I'm going with this. You know where I'm going with this. It is The Werewolf. Now, go ahead. Say what you want to say about it.
Well, I was going to say that's the thing. I feel like the 80s, that was like the decade for the werewolf. I feel like all of the best werewolf movies came out in the 80s. I mean, we saw American Werewolf in London. Silver Bullet happens to be my favorite. I know that it's the look of the werewolf in Silver Bullet isn't necessarily
not great, but it's a great
favorite,
movie. I love that movie. Yeah.
Right. Stephen King again.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we've got the Wolfman from Monster Squad.
Yep. And I think that all of those are great. Other than the Wolfman, the original, arguably the most that is and I would say other than a vampire, and vampire slashers were the iconic monsters of the 80s, I think. But the Wolfman, or the werewolf, I feel like doesn't get the due deserved because it is on a personal level, like American Werewolf in London. I remember seeing actually edited for TV with my mom because she loved the movie. But it's funny, like she probably remembered that there's like a decent amount. I think there's like a pretty John Landis-esque sex scene with what's her name? My boyfriend. See, now it's my turn. Is Agater, Jenny Agater? Is that the love interest from Logan's Run? Right? Isn't that and David McNaughton. I always say her name wrong. And David McNaughton, it's David McNaughton.
Is it? No, it's just Naughton, right?
Naughton. I think of John McNaughton, director of Henry Reports of a Serial Killer. This is how my mind works. Yeah, I like conflate different characters.
And for a second, I got thrown off. I'm like, no, David was the character's name. I'm like, oh
yes,
wait,
it was.
Yes, it was, yes. And it's also the actor's name.
David Naughton. Yeah. That's why I had to pause. I'm like, wait, maybe was it John? I'm like, no, that's John McNaughton. This is how my my mind works. Unfortunately for me.
Yeah.
So anyway, regardless, that movie I've always loved deeply. I was obsessed with it for a window of time in high school, and then I always was a fan of The Howling. I preferred American Werewolf. That was my preference, but I appreciate The Howling the older I've gotten. Though I will say the Munchie Chi looking Poochie at the end has never been. I've always found that laughable, and I think it was meant to be, but it just
are you talking about? Yeah, you're talking about D. Wallace.
Yes. Spoiler alert for The Howling, dude. I hate that because it undercuts the whole movie for me. Like that last part, like, oh my god, or no, her little cute little nose twitching.
She was cute.
It's a cutie.
D. Wallace is always cute.
Yeah, of course she is. But just that moment, I never worked for me. I love American Werewolf more. But, and it goes without saying, Monster Squad, one of my all-time favorites. And Silver Bullet. I love Silver Bullet as well. I do think the design in that is the weakest of maybe only second to the Poochie. But
maybe. I think the story, though, again, it's tough to beat a Stephen King story. I think the story and the background and the origin of the werewolf and Silver Bullet, you can't beat it.
Yeah. All right. So let me go to your mystery pick first, if you're cool with that.
So I came up with this last minute. I was trying to think of one, and this isn't necessarily a franchise or anything, but I thought back to, okay, what do I remember as being a distinct 80s horror movie with memorable killers that like have stuck with me? And this one scared the shit out of me when I was a kid, and it's one that I still adore today. And we've discussed it before, but not necessarily.
I don't know what it is.
So
what's cool is you'll see when the screen's gonna be black for a couple. I don't know how long you set the slides for, but a couple seconds, because I literally right now I see a black screen. I'm about to add it. I do not know what this is, so I'm as in the dark on this, folks, as you are. So let me hit. Here we go. Okay. It's going to play, maybe. There we go. Oh, Alone in the Dark. Interesting choice. Okay.
Yeah. all of the
So-
escaped mental patients led by one Jack
Yeah.
Palance from Alone
And
in the Dark.
Jack Shoulder, right? Didn't Jack Shoulder direct this?
Yes, directed it.
Okay.
Correct.
You know what's funny? You ready for this, dude?
Correct.
Never saw it. Never
Mhm.
seen this movie. Yep. There's my surprise.
Joel.
I have never, and it's one of those there's a handful of those. Like I just talked about Ms. 45 on Jay's show because I'd never seen that. And I love that I'm on,
Ferreira.
yeah, exactly. But I always wanted to see it, but I was always hesitant because the rape revenge genre, I have a sort of like an aversion to by and large, though I appreciate Last House on the Left and some things like that, but it's rough and I don't enjoy it. So I was like, and I thought it was good. Shockingly, I don't know if you've seen Ms. 45, but it's shockingly not as exploitative in that regard as you would think it would be. It's a fantastic film if you haven't seen it. Anybody out there, it's great. But I say that to say this is another one. There's like a list for me of movies that I always am embarrassed to admit I haven't seen. As I've gotten older, I care less and less when people are like, "Oh, how could you have never seen that movie?" Well, because there's only so many hours in a day. Yeah. But I definitely want to see this movie. This is one you and I should cover in some capacity and do like a review for.
Oh, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
All right. So again, I love the poster art for this.
Yeah, it's a great poster. I love it.
I feel like this was one that I might have, again, I saw this when I was very young, way too young. I'm talking probably 3rd grade, maybe.
Yeah.
And what's better is I'm pretty sure I rented this with a friend from our local mom and pop video shop. So
really,
that's the kind of,
that's funny.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like 3rd graders were like, yeah, go ahead. Why not? But I remember it scaring gave me nightmares, scared the hell out of me. But see, I was always a kid where I would get scared for like the first 2 days after I watched it. And then I became obsessed with it and would start like drawing pictures of the characters in school.
Yeah, I get it.
You know what I mean?
Like
I would draw, I would draw characters like that. This is all we would do is like at lunchtime, we would talk about the killers from Alone in the Dark. So do you don't know backstory, plot, anything about this yet? Because I don't want to spoil anything.
I know it has to do with like these like lunatic asylum residents who which I realize is totally the PC way of putting it, who basically it's basically a literal like don't the lunatics kind of take over the asylum, so to speak, or is that what it is, or they take over like a how they I know enough to know it involves escaped mental patients. I know it's got Martin Landau and Donald Pleasence.
We'll leave it at that. Yeah.
And Jack Shoulder directed it. That's really the extent of my knowledge on it. I know they covered it on one of those, what they called it? Was it In Search of Darkness, right? That's the series, the documentary series about the 80s.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I think they covered all of those. And there was a handful of movies. This one, I think, was one of them where I intentionally, when they started to talk about it, because it was where they were going to spoil it, I jumped past it because I know just minimal enough and I don't want to be spoiled. And I've managed to avoid it for 40 years. So I definitely need to watch it.
To me, this is like one of the first, I know this is kind of a thing now. Well, and I think we have Jay of the Dead to thank for the coining of the phrase, but this is like a Avengers of horror, like one of the earliest examples where, you bring together this like rock star cast for a, for a slasher movie. And it's creepy as hell. Again, there's certain scenes and I don't want to get anything yet either because you haven't seen it. And I hope that we can cover this as like a commentary or something down the way, but suffice it to say, there are some very memorable standout scenes from this movie. Cool. And the ending too is one of those, like, it's one of those batshit sort of crazy endings that is just very 80s, I think. So
very cool.
Anyway, this is one that I think that, given enough cocktails, if we were talking about 80s horror movies, I would be hard pressed not to bring up Alone in the Dark. So that's why these guys were my mystery pick for horror icons of the 80s.
Nice. Excellent pick. Now,
what do you got?
So my mystery pick, it's not, now notice up to this point, all of our icons of horror, I would argue, have leaned towards the antagonistic side of things. Would you agree on that point?
I would agree on that, on that point.
So my pick,
they've been bad guys.
I think you'll figure out real quick why. I've actually subliminally been letting you know throughout this entire episode by the shirt I'm wearing.
Oh, of course.
Come on, dude. How is he not on like every horror icon of the horror icon? We didn't say it had to be a villain. We didn't say it had to be the bad. And there's a picture there. See, he is a villain momentarily.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Come on, Ash Williams, the Evil Dead series, I love all of these movies. Like, honestly, it's the one franchise for me personally that I could point to say, I love every movie in it, including the remake for 2013, which I saw for the first time like a few months ago. We established that. That's probably my least favorite, but I still really enjoyed it for what it was. Evil Dead Rise, I know, has been somewhat divisive for some people. For me personally, I don't know anything about it. I'm not telling you nothing. I'm just telling you I loved it. Like, loved it. Which means most likely, based on our track record, you will be like, meh. We'll see how it goes.
I don't know, because I really like 2013, the remake. So
I feel like I will be legit surprised if you don't at least like it close to that. Like, I feel like you'll at least like it.
Well, and that's the thing. I don't think well, I mean, who knows? You never, I mean, we've established you never know with us, you know, the way you or I respectively feel about a new release horror movie is certainly no gauge as to how the other one's gonna take something. So
I know, because
it really doesn't matter what you think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't care what you think, man. Right. But yeah. So this Evil Dead 2.
It's a good pick.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And Evil Dead 2 for me was like it was gateway to like a next level where I like prior to the Evil Dead 2, I was 13, Halloween, 1989, another summer. And I know that's not exactly the lyric, but that's how I always say it. And that year was sort of like the last year I went trick-or-treating, if memory serves. It was the year, I'm 99% sure, I feel like I saw Dr. Paul Bearer at the Winter Haven Mall that year. I had done it when I was younger, but I feel like that was the year I also saw him. He would come to the Winter Haven Mall like Santa Claus on Halloween. And like you could get your picture taken with him, which was freaking awesome.
That's awesome.
It was so cool, dude. Because he lived in Winter Haven. That's where actually he was from. He'd do his show in Tampa, but then he lived in Winter Haven. And then I remember I recorded off of HBO. They had a triple feature. I know I've told this story before, Tyson, but I feel like I always have to talk about it. And it was called. I ended up finding that promo for that triple feature on YouTube, and I used the audio one of the last Spooky Flicks Fests. And I actually I'm going to put it on the channel at some point. I'll probably use it in one of our videos, because like that for me is like one of those, I'm sure we all have this, where I spent years trying to find through like old newspapers. Like you go online, archives of newspapers to find like, when was it that I saw Evil Dead 2 for the first time? It was on, I felt like it was on at the same time with Pumpkinhead. And then there was one other movie. The third movie ended up being, was it called Spell? It wasn't Spellcaster. It had Kelly Preston in it. Oh, I can't remember the name of it, but it was kind of like one of those like erotic, kind of semi-erotic horror thriller type things. Yeah. But there was and I think Pumpkinhead was the second film. That's what I thought for years. I actually think it ended up being Hellraiser 2. I have to go back and look at it, but I know Evil Dead 2 was the first one. I recorded them. I watched it the next day, and I'll never, from the moment that Rosebud animation came up, I watched that movie. If I watched it once, I watched it 60 times that following, like that rest of that school year. Like I couldn't get enough of that freaking movie, dude. It was like constant. Like I'd watch it, rewind the tape. It was like you were Christine. That what you said Christine was for you, that's what Evil Dead 2 was for me. And then when Army of Darkness came out and I went and saw it opening weekend, I just loved it. And this is one of those series where I did it out of order. I watched Evil Dead 2. I might have watched Evil Dead 1 in between that and Army of Darkness. I can't remember. And I like Evil Dead. I like the original Evil Dead, but Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness are top tier for me. Then Evil Dead. And Evil Dead Rise is right in there for me now. And then the Evil Dead remake. It's like, again, the whole series, there's not a stinker in the bunch, in my opinion. So, loved it. Love Bruce Willis. I would say Bruce Willis. See, here it is. Here, think Bruce Campbell. I know who he is. I just was brain farting. I was saying Ash Williams. So that translated in my brain to Bruce Willis. I don't know why. Bruce Campbell as Ash Williams. I think is one of the most iconic characters of 80s horror. That always deserves to be on a top 10 list, or not. It's not top 10, but you know what I mean. It's always deserved to be in a top ranking list of 80s icons.
I can't argue with you.
So as we finish this up here, I guess let me go ahead and switch out our screen. There we go. So as it stands, I was waiting for our special guest. We could wrap it up here, and if he ends up showing up here in the bottom, I'll add him briefly. But if not, that is fine too. We can continue on because we're already almost to 2 solid hours. So at least we know we could do a live stream for 2 hours easily. I think we could do that. Yeah, for sure. Shocker.
I don't think we were. I never thought we were going to have any problem filling the.
I always do.
2 hours.
It's hilarious. I always assume. I'll be like, oh my God. Yeah, we might get an hour 15 minutes. Cut to. This is why my wife's always like, so you'll be in there for 2.5 hours? I'm like an hour and a half tops. 3 hours later. No. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, on that note,
but that's the whole point of us doing this. That's the thing. That's the whole point of us. This is like two geeks hanging out at the video store. This is what would happen. And probably a good thing that we didn't actually work together in a video store because there's no way it would have stayed in business because no work would have gotten accomplished whatsoever.
I worked at a Blockbuster for like a half a second. That didn't work out because again, I was very much in my own head at the time. I was going to be Mr. Filmmaker, and I'd gone from working at a movie theater down to working, and not that I felt like Big Green Video Store was less than, but I think because it was a Blockbuster specifically, you know what I mean? Like there was something about that whole time period. I ended up like walking off the job. It's a whole thing about, I do not look back at that younger version of myself with a lot of pride sometimes. Let's just put it that way. If he was my kid.
We established the fact that I'm actually very proud of the fact that I never had a Blockbuster membership card in my life.
Yeah. And I don't hate Blockbuster, but I always feel like it's funny. Like I didn't really go to a Blockbuster until I was like later high school, maybe even pushing into college as far as like getting movies from one. Because I always went. Now the one I went to, it wasn't like it was it was still a kind of a corporation franchise. It was called Specs. And they did music and movies. So they had like inside the mall, they had like a place where they sold the CDs and the tapes and the singles and all that stuff. And then they had the video store portion that was like towards the front of the mall at the Winter Haven Mall.
So wait a minute. So this was this was a store where you could rent videos and purchase CDs.
Yes.
That's
but they had them separate, but it was in the same mall, but it was weird. It's like, I think we just lost Tyson. Hopefully he will return. Okay, well, I'll keep talking. So yeah, those of you out there that may have, especially if you lived in the Winter Haven area, we had Specs Music and Movies. So at the Winter Haven Mall. Oh, wait, he's coming back. I'll add him to the stream. There he is. We lost you for like a nanosecond.
Yeah, it was the craziest thing.
Why are you trying to leave me, man? So I was getting ready to say, so basically we had Winter Haven Mall, there was a couple of different entrances like most malls would have, right? But one of the main mall entrance, like there was like this store that sort of jutted out, you know, kind of like you walk past it. That was the entrance to the Specs. That was the video rental part. So like when you walk up to it, had all the posters and everything there. And then you walk into the main mall, and on the right-hand side for a long time was, I don't think it was still called Barrel of Fun, but it was like the arcade. There was an arcade there.
Gotcha. A
little further past that was the Specs Music, and that's where I remember getting Metallica's Black album there, and like stuff like that. That was, and they ended up, I think, pushing the two together at some point, over time. But that my very first video store that I remember as a kid that I had the strongest memory of was Armchair Theater, which was more, I don't know if it was a franchise or not, but it seemed like more of a mom and pop. And it was located off of Cypress Gardens Boulevard, like right down the road from my grandmother's house. So I'd stay with my dad and we could like ride our bikes or walk right down there and get movies and stuff, which was freaking awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah. That was almost the name of mom and pops.
Was Armchair Video?
Yeah, I contemplated like we should call it Armchair Theater but I was like, I don't know, the mom and pops thing works too. So yeah.
No, that's cool. So my vitamin shop. Am I frozen up, by the way?
You were for briefly, but I hear you.
Can you
You're
see
still
me?
Frozen vision. I'm guessing it's someone like doing streaming stuff at your house because that'll cause it. But what were you saying about your mom and pop place? And then you.
So I was saying, my formative years, truly, there was 2 mom and pop video stores that I would go to, and then I never really had the franchise membership cards until we got a family video. And then when I was in college, we had a Hollywood video.
Yeah, we had a Hollywood in a movie
Hollywood
gallery.
was the biggest.
Yeah,
it was like the biggest franchise that I was part of. Now my best friend, he worked at Blockbuster for a while when he moved to a much bigger city. But God's honest truth, dude, I can't remember.
He can't remember why he was just removed from the stream unceremoniously. So I would assume we're learning a very valuable lesson here, kids, which is internet connectivity really, really matters. And there he is.
I don't know
great.
why it's doing this.
It's great. You go, I can't remember, and then bloop, you're gone. You were gone.
I can't remember ever stepping foot in a Blockbuster. There, I said it.
You said it. Got out of your system. Well, and you know,
Yes.
it's funny because it's like I see all the nostalgia for Blockbuster because I think so many people, that's all they had. And it's like, it's better than nothing. But I will say Blockbuster was the evil empire for like a lot of people back in the day. That's what everyone forgets. Everyone's like, oh, Blockbuster nostalgia. And I get it. I have a Blockbuster sign sitting right there. I mean, a little one. It's like one my kids gave me for Christmas. But it's still one of those things where I think people could be either are young enough they don't remember, because for them, right, if you grew up in like that maybe later 90s, early 2000s era, you probably didn't have much options beyond Blockbuster, Movie Gallery, Hollywood Video, Family Video, right? I'm thinking those are the big ones for a lot of people. I mean, people had other stuff, but Blockbuster was ubiquitous. Blockbuster was the Netflix of its time. All right. So on that note, we tried to have our special guest on. We will hopefully have him on at a later date. But we're just going to go ahead and wrap this one up. We're past the 2-hour mark. I figure that should be our limit. Plus I have my, and here we are, what we've been running to the whole time, which is losing Tyson, which you guys have missed because we've been editing. So on that note, if he jumps back on, I'll have him say goodbye, but thank you for being here. There he is. All right, let's stop tempting fate. Let's wrap it up. Tyson.
Quick.
Yeah, quick. So thank you for attending, or watching rather, our first pre-recorded sort of podcasty stream. It's not live. It's not live. It's Memorex. But be sure to check out the other few videos we have on the channel. We're going to be adding them weekly. We hope to do these more often, so we have more content for you. So hopefully you like that. And we look forward to doing this live stream. I think tentatively we're going to do an official live stream July 7th. That's a Friday. Right now we're shooting for like noon Eastern, kind of like what we did this one. We'll see if that changes. We'll let you know. But that is the game plan as it stands right now. Any final words there, Tyson?
No, just to piggyback on what you said, thanks for checking this one out. I know it's a little bit longer than what we're used to on the rest of the channel, but that's kind of the point of these. So if you've stuck around through all of these shenanigans and made it this far, Joel and Tyson, your humble mom and pop video shop clerks, we thank you.
Indeed. Indeed, we do.